All right, today I want to talk to you about one of my favorite poets from one of my favorite literary time periods. Robert Blake was one of the fathers of the Romantic movement. I also like to say Robert Blake was the inspiration between a lot of '80s hair band cover album art. So it's not like Robert Blake woke up one day and was like, I think I would like to start a literary movement. But he wrote in the spirit of the age. It was the late 1700s. He was born in 1785. Simultaneously in Scott, so you have Robert Blake in England and you have Robert Burns in Scotland, who both similar times are writing in a new form and a new style that later becomes Romanticism. They didn't wake up and identify themselves as romantic poets. They were expressing themselves artistically through Robert Blake, both through art and through the written word, whereas Robert Burns was writing. Robert Burns was actually probably writing mostly to get women. but, um, so what's going on in England in 1785? This was a time of colonization, of imperialization. We have a burgeoning industrial revolution. Um, Up until this point, life had looked the same, civilization had looked the same, communities had looked the same for centuries, millennia. I mean, minor changes, but people often lived on the same land they lived on for generations. And now all of a sudden, all of this is changing with the Industrial Revolution. Um, the government is taking on a very much laissez-faire attitude, kind of a hands-off in a lot of ways, unless it starts to get trouble, and then there's often a very violent response. So, um, some of the things that are significant in what is romantic literature, there was an experimental boldness, like let's try something new. This creative power that was kind of birthed deep down inside in looking at a world that was changing and confusion with the world that was changing. So, do we embrace what's coming or do we fight for what we used to have? I think that's something very relevant in the world today that we can see happening with art all around us. Um, there was a lot of discarding of traditional procedures and outworn customs, the way things have always been, kind of a pushback to that, pushback away from that. But it's this weird give and take, a kind of a dichotomy of the world is changing quickly and it's scary. So let's look back at the beauty of the past, but let's also break away from the customs and the norms and the traditions that have us bound in. The root of what romanticism is fresh and new and creative. So the way I would talk about this in class is if traditionally we think of like red roses or flowers as being romantic. So if you buy your significant other a dozen red roses, that could be considered very romantic. If you buy your significant other a dozen red roses every year on your anniversary, that could be significant and romantic. I remember Miss Goodwin, my eighth grade social studies teacher, her husband bought her, I could swear it was a dozen flowers for every year they're married. And so on their anniversary every year, it was exciting to go in and see how many flowers were in that classroom. So that's romantic. If your significant other buys you roses every Monday, that might get a little bit old. Maybe even to the point of, hey, let's look at our budget and think about where we're spending our money. Um, if your significant other is buying you roses every day, it no longer is romantic. It's no longer new and fresh and exciting. It becomes old and mundane. And so romantic literature really is trying something fresh and new and exploring these concepts. It's out of the box thinking. So, one of the most important pieces of romantic literature that we have is Frankenstein. Frankenstein, while there is a little bit of lovey dovey in it, it's not a lovey dovey novel. It is out of the box. It's extraordinary. It's new. It's bringing life out of death. It's a totally fresh concept. So, romantic doesn't mean mushy gushy lovey dovey. So, when we talk about the romantic movement, we're talking about changes in both content and style and in structure. We're looking at a return to nature in a response to the heavily polluted, industrialized society that we're moving into. There's even kind of this look at isolationism and exile and travel as a response to these overcrowded cities. There is a look at looking back at the myth and the mythos of legend and history and writing about those things. Um, so when we look at William Blake himself, William Blake was a spiritualist. He was a mystic. While he was a Christian, his beliefs in the Christian church were really rocked by some events that happened in his young adult life, when it came to some legal issues and some matters with the church and how all that went down. But when you say he was a mystic, he believed in the spirit world very much. He was a man of visions. At 4 years old, he believed that he saw God press his forehead up to the window. When he was 9, he looked up and he saw a tree filled with angels dancing. And as a young adult, he was very close to his brother Robert. If I remember correctly, Robert died when Robert was 19. William Blake was a little bit older. I think he was 5 years older, if I remember correctly. And William Blake was trying to figure out how to get his art, his work out there, how to publish. Um, and he believed that his brother came to him in a vision and showed him the art of illuminated printing. And so, one of the things that makes William Blake one of my favorite poets is not just his poetry, but also the art that he created, this beautiful artwork. And he would take copper plates and draw on them and then engrave on the copper plate using acid to make the engraving points. And then he would hand paint these pieces of art, these prints, with watercolors. And then he would use those printed copper plates to press down and make his handmade copies of the books. And then he would hand sew these books. So there's very few actual original limited edition William Blake works out there because they were so painstakingly crafted. He was an art for artist's sake. He wasn't an artist trying to get rich and trying to make a name for himself. He did have a little bit of notoriety at one point in his life, but he did not die wealthy and successful, many would say. He only formal education that he had was in art. He went to art school for a little while, and he was also apprenticed as an artist. He married a woman who was illiterate, and he taught her how to read, and then he also taught her how to help him produce this artwork with these copper plates. I took a few notes here that I wanted to share. I think that covers most of it. In his 60s, he also talking about those copper plates. If you're thinking about, not only did he make his art on the copper plates, he would embed his poetry into the artwork itself. And in order to do that, he would have to write it in reverse in the copper plates. So when he printed it, it was being read the right way, which is just a level of brilliance and genius and artistry that I respect and cannot necessarily fathom. In his 60s, he focused solely on pictorial art. Some of his more famous pieces of art, he illustrated parts of Canterbury Tales. He illustrated the Book of Job. His art for King Nebuchadnezzar in the Old Testament, when Nebuchadnezzar went mad and became like a beast of the field, William Blake has this beautiful, incredible piece of art. So if nothing else, if you watch this video, please Google William Blake's artwork and kind of scroll through some of those things. William Blake was not appreciated until the 1920s. He was overlooked and ignored. So to be the father of a literary movement and not even to be acknowledged as a great writer or artist for almost 200 years is breathtaking and kind of shows you that you don't know today who the great writers of tomorrow will be. Jim Morrison's band, The Doors, was the name of the band. The Doors was inspired by some of William Blake's art. And then I came across this quote of his that I think really sums him up pretty well. William Blake said, "That which can be made explicit to the idiot is not worth my care." He was on a whole other level. So one of the things I love about William Blake is he wrote these two books, and they were these handcrafted, hand-painted books called The Songs of Innocence and The Songs of Experience. And he considered these the two contrary states of the human soul, the songs of innocence and the songs of experience. And most of the poems in the songs of innocence have a parallel in the songs of experience. And so it's looking at life through these two different perspectives. The most famous of these two, the most famous poem from each of these two collections, I think, are The Lamb and the Tiger. So I'm going to read those two to you. So from the Song of Innocence, The Lamb. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead? Gave thee clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly bright. Gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. I, a child, and thou, a lamb. We are called by his name. Little lamb, God bless thee. Little lamb, God bless thee. Sweet nursery rhyme style, the rhyme, the rhythm and the meter, all of those things have this innocent nursery rhyme style to them. And then from the Songs of Experience, we have the tiger. And this poem has a very distinct rhythm to it. And to me, it sounds like the striking of iron on the anvil. So it's got this boom, boom, boom. So tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spear and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Did the same creator who made the beautiful, sweet, innocent lamb also make the harsh, ravaging, ferocious tiger? That's what we're looking at in this shift from an agricultural world to an industrial world, and the shift from the peaceful landscape of our forefathers to this fierce and violent and poverty and stricken, overcrowded cities of the Industrial Revolution. That's what inspired William Blake. My two favorite poems from the Songs of Innocence and the Songs of Experience are The Chimney Sweep. And when you think of The Chimney Sweeper, think of Mary Poppins, chim chimney, chim chimney, chim chim chiree. You know, you've got Dick Van Dyke joyfully dancing around. Where the sad truth of the chimney sweeper of the Victorian era is these children who are basically sold into indentured servantry, and they're dying as they climb up and down these chimneys, breathing in this ash, and this ash is clouding their lungs and killing them. And so their families are neglecting them oftentimes. And so he writes these two poems from the perspective of a chimney sweep. So from the Song of Innocence, we have, when my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me, while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There's little Tom Dacre who cried when his head that curled like a lamb's back was shaved. So I said, hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know that the soot cannot spoil your white hair. And so he was quiet. And that very night, as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned, or Jack, were all them locked up in coffins of black. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. And down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run, and wash in a river and shine in the sun. And naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father and never want joy. And so Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. Even this innocent perspective of death, of being a relief from the sorrows of life, and how this child sold into slavery could find hope in this vision of death. Then we have from the Songs of Experience, a little thing among the snow. I mean, just the difference in the wording there, right? So we've got this, well, I was very young and my tongue could yet cry, weep, weep, weep. The curls on the hair like the lamb's back. Now we shift to the songs of experience. A little black thing among the snow, crying, weep, weep, in notes of woe. Where are thy father and mother, say? They are both gone up to church to pray. Because I was happy upon the heath and smiled among the winter snow, they clothed me in the clothes of death and taught me to sing the notes of woe. And because I'm happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury and are gone to praise God and his priest and king, who will make up a heaven of our misery. So when his parents walk by on the way to church, he smiles and dances and sings and pretends like he's okay, when really he's curled up in the snow, covered in soot and dying. But the songs of experience are he pretends to not be suffering to bring his parents a little bit of peace and joy when they walk by. Anyways, that's just a little taste of William Blake. If you like that, like I said, please check out his artwork if nothing else. I'm sitting outside enjoying nature in honor of Romanticism, and just want to say I love you all, and I hope you have a lovely day.